All right, we're back. Another episode of No Pump Fakes is here, and today we have Chase Hughes, all right, NBC Sports Washington, with us here today. How you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So we have a St. Louis guy and a mod here who's a big fan of Bradley Beal. And usually I ask the first question to get things started. But Mod, do you have any questions along the lines of a young Bradley Beal for Chase?
Well, not really a Bradley Beal question, more of a Washington Wizards question. Like we
Okay.
know they traded Russell Westbrook and they added more depth for Bradley Beal. So my question is, what should be their goals for this year and also next year? Because me and Thea's always talk about Chase, like the worst possible position to be, you're not a top four seed or competing to be a top four seed, and you're like a play-in team. So what should the Washington Wizards goals be?
Yeah, that middle ground can be tough in the NBA. But first of all, it's not just Bradley Beal now. They also got Jordan Goodwin, who's from St.
Mhm.
Louis, went to St. Louis University.
Yep.
And Bradley Beal's actually known him since he was like 12 or 13 years old when he was coming up through the AAU ranks. So it's two St. Louis guys on the team now, and they're both playing really well. As far as the goals, I think the way the Wizards see it is obviously they've committed towards like moving forward rather than looking backwards and trying to tank. So I think what they hope is that they'll make the playoffs this year and sort of take a step forward from where they were last year, which was missing the postseason altogether, and set themselves up to maybe it's at the deadline or maybe it's in the summer to make a big trade or make a move that then levels them up from there. So I think they're trying to kind of take it one step at a time. And yeah, they want to go on a deep playoff run, but I don't think they have maybe the tools to do that right now. But even if they made the playoffs, it would be a step forward.
What would you say their ceiling is for this season,
Uh,
or
well,
or
as
potential ceiling? I say.
Yeah, I think as of right now, probably make the playoffs and maybe win a series. I would have to note that the Eastern Conference is better than it's been in a long time. I mean, last year it required a winning record just to make the play-in tournament. When 2 years before that, in the bubble, the Wizards were the 10th seed. It was before the play-in tournament as currently constituted was put in place. They were the 10th seed in the East, and they were 20 games under 500. So it's come a long way in just a couple of years. And that was a 72 game season, by the way. So like over 82 game season, they might have been like 25 games under 500. So it's definitely a tough conference. So I think if they were, if they won like 45 games, 46 games, I think that would probably represent sort of a best case scenario as they are currently constructed. But again, that would be a pretty big step forward for them.
Now, Bradley Beal is just scoring like 22 points per game this year, shooting 45% for the field, about 35% for the three-point line. He's averaging 6 assists so far this season. Are you a little concerned that his scoring is taking a little dip, or are you more happy because that means he has better teammates around him?
I think overall so far he's had a good year. I mean, his scoring average is not what it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago when he was averaging 30 points a game, but the efficiency's up a little bit, especially from last year. He's shooting better from the field than he has in years, and his 3-point percentage is up. He's shooting well from the line, and he's also playing good defense. Like
Yeah.
that's not something he's been known for a long time, but he's drawn rave reviews from Wes Unseld Jr. this year for his defense on the perimeter. Now, the big problem with Bradley Beal so far has been his turnovers. He's had a lot of turnovers. He had 7 the other night. Last night he had 5 turnovers in the first half. He didn't have a turnover in the second half, so credit to him there. But they've tried to kind of run a lot of more of the offense through him since DeLon Wright got hurt. He's their backup point guard. And Bradley Beal, admittedly has had a lot of trouble protecting the ball.
Yeah, he's shooting 51% for the field, not 45. My bad. But you talked about him having a little trouble with turnovers and kind of protecting the ball. I feel like that's the missing piece for the Washington Wizards. They probably need to go out and get like a playmaking type of point guard that can assist Bradley Beal. Because like I said, his assists are up, but you want Bradley Beal more so scoring the ball, not necessarily passing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as far as their point guard position, obviously they'll hope to get DeLon Wright back healthy, but I think they'll also hope that Monte Morris just plays better moving forward. They acquired him and they traded Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to get him to be their starting point guard. And, Wes Unseld Jr.'s got the history with him going back to their Denver days. And Monte Morris just hasn't really played as well this year that he did last year in Denver. So I think they tend to be a pretty patient team. Like once they get to the trade deadline, they'll make a bunch of moves, but it's kind of pretty common for them under Tommy Shepard to let things play out over a pretty long course of time. So I would imagine that they'll see how things go with Monte Morris for a while, and also continue to rely on Jordan Goodwin. He's been really good for them. He's been probably the surprise of the season so far for them, because he's an undrafted guy on a two-way contract. And all of a sudden, even when Monte Morris was healthy, he missed their last game with an ankle injury. Morris has been on the bench in the fourth quarter. They've been riding with the guy, Jordan Goodwin, who's on a two-way contract.
And could you talk about Bradley Beal's overall impact on the district as a whole? I think I saw over the weekend he did I think I want to say he was at some Thanksgiving drive, I believe, and just in general, right? Like obviously he's been there for a great amount of years, and to now see him still being able to stay with one team and everything like that. What would you say his overall impact has been on the community as a whole down there?
I mean, it's like hard to overstate, to be honest. He played with John Wall. John Wall won the Community Assist Award, and John's had a tremendous impact on DC. But then it was like, I think the next year or the year after that Bradley Beal won the Community Assist Award, which is, of course, an NBA sanctioned award for someone who has the biggest impact in the community. And he didn't slow down after that. I think he won it in like 2018. And he's had a lot of initiatives since. This past offseason, he paid to refurbish a court in Northeast DC near Howard University at Banneker Recreation Center. And this particular event was a Thanksgiving meal giveaway where he, along with a bunch of players from the Wizards and the Mystics and other teams under Monumental Basketball, they gave out Thanksgiving meals. They gave out clothes. They gave out household items, and also giant gift cards, grocery store gift cards. So it was definitely a great event. It's the second year that they've done that. But what really struck me about it is what Bradley Beal said about why they wanted to do that event in that specific location. It was only a few blocks away from the Wizards practice facility, which I'm sure most people, even in the DC area, don't realize exactly where it is, but it's in Ward 8 in Southeast DC in Congress Heights, in one of the most underserved parts of DC. And Bradley Beal said that it meant a lot to him to give back to that community because they have their headquarters now in those people's backyard. And he was like, we got to show our face. We got to be out in the community. We got to help these people. And he said a lot of really interesting things. And you could tell he's put a lot of thought into what he would like to see that area become long-term, because now that the practice facility is there, there's going to be a lot of growth around it. And he's made a point to say that the people who live around the facility need to get the jobs that are created by all the development that is set to happen, that has already happened, because he wants to make sure that these people aren't pushed out of their neighborhoods that they've lived in for generations.
That's not surprising at all, considering where he's from. UCD, St. Louis, Missouri. It's the similar situation where I'm from, so it doesn't really surprise me at all. Shout out to Brad for being a real one. I have another question for you, Chase. Kyle Kuzma, I want to ask you, has he found his NBA home with the Washington Wizards?
I think so for now, but he can opt out of his contract after this year. So
that's
we'll
why
see.
I asked, yeah. He's only making like $13 million. He has a player option, $13 million next year. He's definitely going to opt out of his contract. So that's why I want to know, do you think Kyle Kuzma is going to potentially be there with the Washington Wizards long term, or do you think it's just kind of like, okay, he's playing well now to kind of boost his trade stock, then you guys may get rid of him?
Well, the price is going to go up for sure. I mean, he's averaging like 19 points a game this year, and it's been a little bit inconsistent, but it's basically been a carryover from last year, where from the second half of the season, he was putting up all-star numbers. So if he keeps this up, I would imagine his annual salary is going to double from where it is now. I mean, $13 million, I think I could easily see him making 25 plus. And, as far as whether his future is here, it's going to be difficult because the Wizards now have a Supermax contract on the books with Bradley Beal. They've also got Kristaps Porzingis. You'd probably have to go into the luxury tax to re-sign Kuzma at the price that I think he's going to command. But I will say, the Wizards, their franchise hasn't been necessarily the most successful team in the standings over the years, but they bat 1,000 when they try to keep their own guys. You could really not name a player that has left them in free agency. And sometimes you could argue to their detriment, right? Like John Wall, they signed him to a Supermax deal. Yeah. He ended up getting hurt. It didn't work out. They signed Otto Porter to a max deal. That didn't work out. They signed Davis Bertans to a huge contract. That didn't work out. Now they've had some success with other deals, but basically when it comes down to it, if they want to keep a player, they end up doing it. They're really good at that. And I think in Kuzma's case, he's very well liked by ownership. I think he's really liked by the players in the locker room. He's a fan favorite. I mean, he's just a marketable guy. He's got a big personality and a Q rating, and he's a good player. He's the type of player that I think you can win with as one of your top players on your team. He's not necessarily an all-star, although I think he could become an all-star at some point. But the way he plays, he's an unselfish player. He makes the right pass. He plays defense. Certainly, efficiency is always going to be something you watch with him, but he is the type of player that of course, you never want to overpay anyone, but he's the type of player that I think you'd want to build around. So I wouldn't bet against the Wizards keeping him if it does come down to that.
Yeah, the Wizards are definitely in a tough spot. And I was smiling while you were saying that because it's it seems like it's a lot of strings that would have to be pulled just to end up as a 6 seed. And the only reason why I say that is because at the end of the day, if their ultimate goal is to win a championship, which I'm sure it is, whether you pay Kyle Kuzma, whether you decide not to trade Bradley Beal, whatever the case may be, do we feel like this is a championship team? Do we feel this is even a top 4 seed in the East? And so it's you're gonna have two decent sized contracts, I'll say, at least your top 2 players. But then it's okay, well, what exactly is next for the franchise? Do we think this is a team that's gonna make the playoffs? Do we think this is a team that's gonna make the finals or what? So I personally, and Ahmad knows, I definitely think Kyle should get his money. I definitely think that Kyle is deserving of the contract. But from an organization standpoint, what exactly, is the real question here? What exactly are the Wizards doing? They're in a very unique situation, right? I mean, we touched on this before, but some teams are clearly trying to tank, and some teams are trying to transition, if you will, and some teams are trying to win a championship. But if we had to say, what exactly is it that we think the Wizards are trying to do right now, or at least within the next 12 months, I'll say?
Well, that's a good question. Go ahead.
You make
fair
points. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that is a fair question, Theus. And I feel like if you look at the landscape of the NBA now, I think the whole super teams are dead. So I feel like guys is going after teams trying to win a championship, let's get a super team like the Brooklyn Nets or like the Los Angeles Lakers tried to do. I think it's more so going to be more about fit. And Kyle Kuzma kind of fits this roster with the Washington Wizards. So the question is what value can you get Kyle Kuzma in for his contract? He's a 6'10" wing that can score in a variety of ways. He can defend. He can shoot threes. That doesn't really grow on trees. And also the biggest difference with Kyle Kuzma right now with the Washington Wizards compared to the Los Angeles Lakers, I would say it's just his glass cleaning ability, him being aggressive on the defensive, getting defensive rebounds, but most importantly also offensive rebounds as well. And then he's also one of the best closeout attackers this league has seen in the NBA right now. So he's a valuable player, I think, for the Washington Wizards. It's just kind of figure out what value for a contract that you want to get him for. So it's like you said, this is a very tough situation.
No, and you guys make some good points. If you're going to have a Supermax and then a Kristaps Porzingis contract, which is a lot of money,
yes,
and then you're going to give Kuzma a lot of money, well, the expectations have to match that, right? If you're going to go into the luxury tax, which they've only done once, where they actually went through the season on the luxury tax, because of course you can get out from under that at the trade deadline if you want, which is what they did one year. They had a team that went to the second round of the playoffs, and then they re-signed Wall and Porter because they thought they could take a step forward after that. So they paid they are willing to pay the luxury tax if they're winning, but are they going to be willing to pay that if they're the 8th seed or something? So it's definitely a big question. I will say, if they make the playoffs this year, there could be a lot of moving parts going into the offseason because they've got a first round pick that's tied up in protections for the next few years. But it starts this year and it conveys to right now the Knicks own it if they make the playoffs because it's lottery protected. So if the Wizards make the playoffs, that first round pick will go to them. And then all of a sudden, the next few years of first round picks become available for them to trade if they wanted to. So, at some point you got to match money if you want to make a big trade. So there's just a lot of moving parts, but I would say that if they're motivated to keep Kyle Kuzma, then they probably will be able to just because you look at their history.
Would you go ahead, Theus?
Do we feel that Kyle Kuzma could make an all-star game within the next 2 years?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, you look at his numbers now going back to last December. So it's almost a calendar year, and it's about like 55 to 60 games. So more than half a season. And he's averaging 20 points, 9 rebounds. He's shooting pretty strong percentages from the field and from three, averaging about 4 assists. So, if he's produced that sample size of 20 and 9 with pretty good percentages, I would definitely say he could. But, if the Wizards, obviously, you got to be in the playoff picture to oftentimes to even get one All-Star. And are they going to be good enough to have 2 All-Stars? That would be a question of mine. But I think numbers wise, there's definitely potential for it.
Potential. I think that's a strong, I would give it probably like like a 20% chance he probably becomes an all-star. Because I don't even know. I like Kyle Kuzma a lot, but I don't even know if he's the best big on his team. Like Porzingis is having quietly a low-key, really strong year. He's 19, 45 from the field, also shoot 37% for the three-point line, also grabbing 7 rebounds. He's kind of like having a really low-key, like good season. People really aren't talking about him as much, maybe just because the Luka situation, what happened didn't happen with the Dallas Mavericks, or maybe it's because Porzingis' injury history, but I don't know. But he's having a really great season as well. And I think he's probably the best big on their team.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
You could argue he's been their best player so far.
You can this season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair. So, we're talking about players, of course, that are actually on the Wizards, but there is a name that I want to bring up, a player that is not on the Washington Wizards, but from the area. Kevin Durant. Do either of you feel that there's any possibility or likelihood that he will be a member of the Washington Wizards before he retires?
Oh, that's a great question. Before he retires, I've been asked the question many times before, will he play for them this offseason? But before he retires, I've never been asked that before. I definitely think there's a possibility, but he'd have to change his perspective pretty significantly from 2016 when he chose to join the Warriors and then said, I think it was to Marcus Thompson, the Athletic, not long thereafter, saying that he just didn't want to play at home. And I don't think his mindset has changed in that sense. I mean, I've heard from people that it hasn't, and here we are, 5-6 years later. So I think he's still got plenty left in his prime. I think he could play until he's 40 if he wants to. He's just so talented, and thankfully he's come back from the Achilles injury just fine. But he'd have to change his mind. There must be a reason why he didn't want to play at home. I don't know. Maybe there's just too many people who would be asking him for tickets or something. But for whatever reason, he did not want to play at home. So I think he'd have to get over that, and maybe he will with time.
Also, a lot of pressure as well. Like you playing at your home, you grew up somewhere. It's just like they're going to be expecting a championship, and he's trying to do that right now with the Brooklyn Nets, and that's been a challenge so far.
But most of these guys do, in their heart of hearts, want to play at home at some point. Like Will Barton, for instance, right now, he's from Baltimore, and when he got here, said that it's always been a goal for him to at least play one season in Washington because he's close to home. And I interviewed Grant Hill over the summer, and I asked him, did he ever have a chance to play for the Wizards? And he said that late in his career, he was talking to them when MJ was in charge of the front office. And he says that looking back, he wishes he did play for the Wizards at least 1 year of his career. So I think most guys would like to just, have that experience, even if it's for one season, but maybe Durant's different because of what he said previously.
Now, Chase, I talked about the Wizards kind of missing that playmaking guard. There was a guard that the Washington Wizards traded to get Kyle Kuzma and KCP for, and Bradley Beal kind of had his best statistical season. If Russell Westbrook is available next year, well, he will be free agent. Is there any possible chance that that's a guy that the Washington Wizards go back and say yo, we want you to be a part of this again? This push to continue to make us a consistent playoff team, especially with, we know, we talked about community earlier, Theus, Russell Westbrook had a big part of that community as well, the lone season he was there. So, and then we already know the fit works with Bradley Beal as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I definitely think there's a chance. I don't know if I'd say it's likely, but I would just point to the fact that, the Wizards didn't want to trade him. He requested a trade to get out of there. And I remember Ted Leonsis told ESPN, it was actually in a story about Alex Ovechkin. It was about re-signing Ovechkin. And when he was saying, it's just, it's kind of shows the difference between the NBA and the NHL that Russell Westbrook wanted to go LA and Ovechkin chose to stay home. Now he, that comment to me just said that, like, okay, I thought that they wanted to keep Russell Westbrook, and that made it pretty clear. But they loved having Russ here, and I think Russell Westbrook enjoyed playing here. I think it was a unique opportunity for him to go to LA, and obviously he had an idea in his mind that didn't play out as expected, where he would maybe win a championship with LeBron and Anthony Davis. It hasn't worked out for them, at least so far, but him and Bradley Beal were great together, man. Like, Brad had his best season. He was all NBA, and Westbrook, once he got healthy the second half of that year, they really turned it on defensively. So I definitely wouldn't rule that out. I think it would get the approval, at least from the ownership level, based on what Ted told ESPN in that interview. And I think Westbrook did like it here. I also wonder, how many teams would be willing to sign him if he was available because of the baggage that he has. Even though I still think he's a really good player, and we're seeing it now that he's on the bench. Yeah. I also do think that at some point he'll go back to OKC, but they're so guard heavy right now with SGA becoming a star, and they've got Josh Giddey, and they drafted Jalen Williams, who I think is going to be really good. So it just might not be the right timing and the right fit. Yeah. But if he came back to the Wizards, I mean, maybe you move Monte Morris to the backup role as a point guard. He's thrived in that position before. So I definitely think it could work. And that'd be a pretty interesting lineup. Westbrook and Porzingis together with Bradley Beal on the wing. It's not bad.
Yeah. I like it. We'll see though. One of the final questions that I have for you, Chase, is it's a Bradley Beal question. What would you do if you were Bradley Beal?
What would I do if I was Bradley Beal? Well, if you asked me 6 months ago, I would have done exactly what he did, which is just take the money, take the contract. He's 29. Like, if it doesn't work out here, he hopefully he'll have plenty, left in his prime where he can win a championship or try to go for a championship, whether it's here or elsewhere. But I would kind of see where this goes for now. I don't think there's any reason why he would want to request a trade anytime soon or anything like that. I think the Wizards have found him a pretty good running mate in Kristaps Porzingis. John Wall and Russell Westbrook were really good players and were really good offensive players because of their passing. But I think Porzingis is both the best scorer that Bradley Beal's ever played with here and also the best rim protector. And I say scorer just because he can give you 20 points at higher efficiency than those guys can. And there's just never been anyone who can block shots like he can here. So if Porzingis stays healthy, I think they have a chance to be a pretty good combination. But as we've discussed, you do wonder what the ceiling is. So if they do take a step forward, I'm sure Bradley Beal will be paying very close attention to what they do after that, because, if they make the playoffs this year, that's cool. That's a step forward. But obviously he wants to do more than that. And he'll be going into his age 30 season. So I think I would see where this goes. I think Porzingis and him have a chance to be a pretty good combo as long as Porzingis stays healthy.
My final question is, Gilbert Arenas, John Wall, Bradley Beal, all in their primes. What player are you picking to build around your franchise with?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I'd probably go with John Wall because at his peak, he was the best defensive player of the three. And all three, I mean, like, Arenas was probably the best scorer at his peak. Beal, obviously very good at scoring. They're both better at scoring than John Wall ever was. But John Wall was such a good passer. He makes so many guys around him better. So I think if you're building a team, the style that John Wall plays would just be great to have no matter what the pieces are around him. So I think I'd go with Wall, but obviously I could make the case for Arenas and Beal. I think Arenas' peak was the highest of them because he was a second team All-NBA guy, one of the best scorers in the league. But yeah, I'll go with Wall of those three.
Yeah, I mean, Bradley Beal was an All-Star game starter. I don't think Gilbert ever was that. But yeah, I'll probably go with John Wall too. I think John Wall's two-way ability, during John Wall's peak, he was one of the best, probably the best pure point guard in the league. Just passing, scoring, defending as well. And also I think it's an easier fit to surround players around John Wall's skill set more so than probably a shooting guard or a combo guard like Gilbert Arenas or a shooting guard like Bradley Beal.
Yeah, I mean, I like the John pick. I mean, obviously there's his ability to score and put the ball on the floor and facilitate definitely helps. I would go Gilbert Arenas though, just from a straight up scoring perspective, obviously, to do it at his position and as well as the clutch baskets that he's had. I'm always gonna remember that moment or that game he had against the Lakers at Staples Center as one of like the more memorable games I think I've ever kind of heard about. But I don't think there's a wrong answer here. Obviously, we're talking about three of the greatest Wizards, to ever play the game. But yeah, I think if I had to choose one, it would probably be Ace and Zero. But
yeah, he was cold.
There's no, yeah, but I say there's no. I think what it was with Gilbert was he was a little bit ahead of his time.
For sure.
I think if he played in this era, it would have been a lot different. Obviously, everyone knows that Gilbert was cold, but now in an era where it's more appreciated when you see guards score as opposed to back then, it wasn't just a wing thing or a big man kind of thing. But so, but I would go with Gil though. But Chase, do you have any final words for our lovely No Pump Fakes audience? Any takes, any predictions, or just overall watch more Wizards games? Tell people that Kyle Kuzma will be on the team for at least 5 more years. Whatever you like to leave our audience with, man.
I'll say look up Jordan Goodwin. The national audience probably hasn't heard about him yet, but he's I think he's legit, man. I think he's just starting out what's going to be a pretty long and successful NBA career. And shout out to St. Louis again.
Yes, sir. See the hat. Yes, you already know.
Thanks. There we go. All right, y'all. Chase Hughes. All right, NBC Sports Washington. Appreciate you for pulling up on No Pump Fakes. And just like that, y'all, we gone. Peace.